All right, everyone, welcome back to Veritas Live. I am your host, Demetrius Malbro, and today we are talking about running your business critical applications on Kubernetes in the cloud. So let's also take a brief moment and let's see where everyone is watching from. So go ahead and type into that chat window exactly where you're from. And also, as you are typing, go ahead and ask any questions that you may have in the chat window as well, because we will be taking as many questions as possible from the audience. So really appreciate everyone being here. And I would like to introduce my colleague, Doward Wilkinson, who is the Senior Principal Product Manager here at Veritas. Doward, how are you?
Hey, hi Demetrius, how you doing?
I am doing well and super excited to have this conversation with you. But let's break the ice a little bit. So let's see, what questions shall I ask you? Maybe around, not going to ask you a question about your hair because I really like what it's doing there and I don't have any. So what about, so you've been in the backup game maybe longer than me. So what's your oldest memory around backup and recovery? And it has to be older than tape.
Older than
Older than tape.
maybe paper tape?
Oh,
So
punch cards?
punch card type paper tape where you have to actually, so I used to work on very old technology called Honeywell 2020s, which were the front end mainframe computers, and it was all what we call at the time TTL logic. So basically, to recover those, we would have to attach a tape reader and spin a tape through, and that would actually recover the operating system, so that we can go back to business as needed. So yeah, it was old technology. It worked. Albeit we had to have a lot of copies of the tape because sometimes they burn up in the reader themselves. So they go so fast as they are loading into the bubble memory on the devices. So just old technology, but it was a lot of fun at the time. It was interesting. So.
Okay, I won't even touch on that burn up.
Yeah, it's way
It's not worth it. I'm thinking DR and disaster recovery and
no, this is back in the days of acoustical 300 baud acoustical couplers. So I'm aging myself here.
well, that's super exciting. I am glad I wasn't around when those things were going on because I probably wouldn't even be in this profession today.
Yeah.
But before though we jump into this conversation, let's talk a little bit about some of the research that Veritas did with Vanson Bourne on securing your enterprise environment in a multi-cloud environment.
Yeah.
And came back and said that 67% of organizations plan to increase their adoption on Kubernetes workloads. So let's see. One thing that I do want to ask you, Doward, is that you have lots of experience in the industry. You've worked on premises with workloads on premises. You've also worked with workloads in the cloud as well. And I want to get your opinion around what makes Kubernetes different than traditional workloads. And also, how does this impact a cyber resiliency strategy for backing up these workloads?
Yeah. So traditionally we have on-prem monolithic type of applications. So very specific application that does a specific job, and it in and itself, it's a great technology, but sometimes it's challenging to expand it. If you want to upgrade an environment, in some cases, for example, you might have to take the application down. You're also planning for peak usage in many cases. So if you have an application, for example, that you run at 20 or 30% during a period of time, and then you've got to scale it up for end of month auditing or something along those lines. You have to build out the hardware infrastructure. Now, of course, virtual machines have helped to manage that quite a bit and reduce some of those costs. But really, when you start thinking about the newer types of technology, especially in the cloud native types of technology, this enabling technology, it really allows you to take advantage of software-oriented architectures. That allows you to actually put the right resources for the right job as it's needed, and the ability to go out there and take advantage of the elasticity associated with sort of what we would call today a cloud native environment. And then furthermore, the newer technologies tend to offer the ability to be more composable in your software code. So you can have you can use your software code in different ways for different types of applications or different needs within the overall environment. So it makes for more efficiency in terms of coding, but it also adds a degree of complexity that Kubernetes actually helps to address or helps to orchestrate in the environment.
Okay. Yeah, all of that is super, super fantastic. And I really love that journey just with workloads running on-prem and also workloads in the cloud, utilizing Kubernetes as the orchestration engine as well. And also, not to make you nervous though, Dower, we do have people watching from India, from Canada, Nigeria, and also Brazil. A few of those are on my list that I have to hit.
Yeah, all places I've been.
Oh, come on. See, there you go again. All right. And so another thing that I do want to tap your brain on is that what are some of the key areas organizations fail to consider when formulating a robust backup strategy, especially for Kubernetes, Doward?
Yeah, so the infrastructure, especially in the cloud, but also on-prem, there's many companies that are running Kubernetes on premises, and so they use in many cases, their traditional hardware storage environment, and they would take something like Red Hat OpenShift and layer it on and be the management of that environment. But in terms of the cloud environment, we've come to kind of think of cloud being this 1990s of infrastructure. Everything's always available. I don't have to worry about my data anymore because the cloud provider is out there making sure that there's a certain amount of uptime associated with that. And so over time, we kind of started to take this idea of backups and say, well, I don't really need to continue to take backups because I'm covered in other ways. But the reality is that, the shared responsibility model associated with many of the cloud providers really emphasizes that your security and your data are something that you have to manage. And so what I've heard, I've heard it said in the past, like if you go to your dentist, we all go to the dentist and it's kind of like backups are like flossing, right? We go and we say, yes, we're doing it. But the reality is a lot of us aren't. We're just going and saying, hey, we're flossing when in fact we're not. And the same thing holds true of backups. So in many cases, people are assuming someone is backing things up or protecting that data. But there's a lot of things, especially now with the cloud environment in a Kubernetes environment, that can go wrong. Now, Kubernetes, to its credit, all the concepts that go into that, the microservices and the containers and what have you, they're very resilient and very good at recovering themselves, but still the data that they are managing is very, very valuable. I mean, what would happen, for example, if so we have this concept of more and more applications in the cloud being managed by DevOps teams, and these teams own the entire application, this shift to the left concept that we hear about a lot. And so one of the challenges associated with that is they're coding and they're changing things all the time. What if some of the code got bad, some of the code was a problem, and you actually corrupted your data? So it becomes an issue that backups are critically important in a Kubernetes environment. However, as we're transitioning to these huge applications in a native cloud format, really unlike some of these monolithic applications, there could be thousands of, or in many cases, tens of thousands of components associated with these applications. And they may all have different requirements, different life cycle policies, all of these things that are going on, and how do you get your hands around it? So when you start talking about backups associated with cloud native environments, you really need to make sure that your backup solution is robust and scalable enough to address that in the format that Kubernetes is used to dealing with. So really what you want to do is make sure that at the end of the day, that if you're dealing with a Kubernetes environment, you want to make sure that your backup solution truly understands that environment was architected and built for Kubernetes, as opposed to trying to make certain adjustments and what have you. So you want to make sure that you're aware of all things that are happening in the Kubernetes environment, and make sure that your backup environment, your backup solution is well aware of those changes that are happening on the fly, with obviously scalability in mind too.
Yeah, so you touched on a lot of different components there. You talked about the shared responsibility model, where we still have organizations and companies utilizing SaaS platforms and still thinking that, yes, my data is in the cloud. So that means that my data is protected while it's in the cloud. So not necessarily true, right? You are still responsible for your data. And what was that? Was that a flossing analogy?
Yeah, flossing analogy. Yeah. So, we, like I said, we go to the dentist and we say, yes, have you been flossing? And you go, yes. But the reality is that a lot of us aren't. So it's just a fun little analogy. But the reality is that ultimately, as an organization, whether your data is on-prem or your data is in the cloud, ultimately, you're responsible for that data. You need to make sure that data is secure. You need to make sure that data is protected from ransomware. You need to make sure that that data is managed correctly and backed up correctly. And furthermore, you always want to keep costs in mind too. So you want to take advantage of the elasticity associated with the cloud. So today, there are certain native tools out there that depend on taking snapshots, and in and of itself, that technology is good, but it can be challenging in some cases if you happen to lose a snapshot or you have some sort of corruption associated with it. But more to the point is just taking one snapshot after another and trying to manage that over the course of a life cycle with thousands of components that you have to keep track of becomes really, really challenging. So you really need to consider how you manage the data and the massive amount of data that you're building out in your Kubernetes environment with thousands, if not tens of thousands of components, and then making sure that your application, your backup application, is well aware of what is occurring in that environment.
Yeah, all great points there. And also, please make sure you ask questions in the chat. We are here and ready to answer your questions around Kubernetes and containers and even backup and recovery. Any questions that you have, please go ahead and type them in the chat. Doward is super qualified to answer those questions, and also Doward as well. So the floss analogy to me is like saying that you were flossing, but you get to the dentist and there are 8 cavities.
Yeah.
You end up having. So yeah, it's not a good thing. And so I guess the dentist is the CIO in this case.
Exactly.
But do you like my shirt?
I do. That's cool. Yeah.
Right. So I bought this shirt at KubeCon in Amsterdam several weeks ago. I absolutely love the city. It's amazing. And did a little bit of sightseeing. I won't tell you exactly what I got to see and where I went. I'll just maybe keep that private. But one thing that I do want to ask you about KubeCon, though, Dower, is that some of the surprising things, there were a lot of people that stopped by the booth. What were some of the conversations that you had at the booth at KubeCon Europe 2023?
Oh, wow. That was a really exciting show. So there was probably 10, 11,000 people who visited KubeCon this year. I'll tell you a couple of things. So there was a lot of people there who are strictly looking for just education. They haven't made the transition into Kubernetes. Their management sent them to this show to actually learn about what is coming down the line. What are some of the challenges? And we were able to actually talk to customers about some of the challenges of migrating from, for example, a monolithic type of application into a cloud native, whether it's on-prem or it's actually in a hyperscaler, for example, AWS or Azure. We also were able to talk to a lot of DevOps people who are out there and they're making this type of transition and chat with them about some of the challenges that they're experiencing, they're having as they migrate off of these traditional platforms into a cloud environment, and reemphasize the responsibility around the shared responsibility model, and that it's important that their data be backed up and managed correctly. Or in many cases, of course, for in Europe, especially, this was KubeCon Europe, as you mentioned, in Amsterdam. The European Union has very strict regulatory requirements about making sure data is managed correctly. And because you're in a cloud environment or in a more modern cloud native type of environment, it doesn't really alleviate you of the responsibility to make sure that that data is available and well managed. And then people would come in, and some of them are very, very far along in their journey into a cloud native type of environment. And what we found is, like, they all of a sudden discovered that they did have that responsibility, that backup and recovery was really, really important as far as going along and making sure that their data was properly protected and available. So there was a lot of things that were going on. We had a wide variety of folks. It seemed like the emphasis was predominantly on making that transition as well as education. Clearly, there's a challenge. We saw this. We've talked to our other customers about it and what have you, around a talent gap associated with cloud native solutions. It's one thing to talk about, oh, we're going to go to the cloud, but if you lift and shift and just drop your applications into the cloud, you're really not truly taking advantage of the elasticity, the flexibility, the security that the cloud can offer. And that sometimes is a problem for customers. So we spend a lot of time educating customers about the technology and then how we are implementing the technology to make sure that their environment is safe and managed well.
Okay, all great points there. And I'm getting a little excited here. I see some questions flowing in on the chat. So there's one around, do we protect OpenShift or protecting OpenShift? And then there's also another one around how do you ensure that the backup is reliable?
Yeah, so that's a really, OpenShift is a Kubernetes distribution provided by Red Hat. There's others out there. There's Tanzu from VMware. There's various others, AKS, EKS, GKS, that kind of thing from the hyperscalers. So there's a number of Kubernetes distributions out there that many people are working with. We actually protect all of those distributions. And we do this because we are what we call using cloud native Kubernetes tools. So we integrate via API with all of those solutions, make sure that we can actually transfer data from one distribution to another distribution if the customer so wants to have that happen. The advantage to that, quite frankly, is that companies are inquisitive. They do acquisitions. They buy and sell divisions and what have you. So if you standardize on OpenShift, which a lot of customers do, but they've made an acquisition and they're bringing somebody in who's running on a different distribution, it's nice that they don't actually have to change their data protection platform. Their data protection platform will manage and give the consistency across all of those distributions. So that's an advantage. So to answer your question, OpenShift, yes, we support OpenShift. The second question was, the second part of that?
To ensure the backup is reliable.
So that's great. So we interface with the native snapshot technology that is usually used to take a backup. So we manage that process. We take a snapshot, and then immediately we take that snapshot or those snapshots, instead of just keeping them out there as snapshots, and customers have to manage that. We run them through our deduplication engine. We run them into our traditional Alta data management platform that not only stores them in our environment, it makes sure that we're taking advantage of the flexibility that cloud offers. For example, if you're running a big backup at the end of the month, instead of having to allocate resources or pre-allocate resources that you do in some monolithic type of applications, we can spin up a number of data movers, move that data into our engine, into our platform, and then at that point, when we're done, we drop those out, which saves customers a huge amount of cost, as much as 40 or 50% of cost, because you're only applying the resources that you need. As you know, cloud resources are sold on an as-needed basis, generally speaking. And so if you can take those data movers and you no longer need them, drop them out of the system and hand them back into the pool, you are reducing costs dramatically for customers.
Okay. Awesome. So the answer to that question is yes. The backups are reliable. And we do protect OpenShift as well. And so, I appreciate the questions. Maybe, I'm not sure if we have time for another question or not, but the conversation, I'm really enjoying it. I think I am learning some things as well. And also just from you, Doward, any maybe one statement that would get the CIO to sit up and listen and say, you know what, I want to write a check to make sure I have the proper solution to protect our Kubernetes environment. One sentence on that.
Oh boy. I don't know if I could, because I'm long-winded, I don't know that I can do one sentence. But I can say is that this technology is complicated, and it can be challenging to implement, but it's also offers so many benefits from a cost and efficiency perspective. What I would say is, in terms of one sentence, is don't forget that you want to, at the end of the day, it's all about the data, which is really the new oil. And the data is what is important, and making sure that data is secure and recoverable in an efficient way within the cloud native environment is key to taking advantage of a cloud native Kubernetes type of environment.
All right. And so data is the number one component, especially in this fast moving world that we're in now. I've said that we have gone quantum since COVID is over now. But to also mention, before I wrap up right now, I do want to let everyone know that I have recorded a few Lightboard videos, and they are called TLDR videos on the Veritas Tech channel. The most recent one that is out there right now is called How to Achieve Enterprise Resiliency and Storage Management for Kubernetes. So be sure to go out there, click the link, watch the video, subscribe, and also hit the like button as well, because that obviously helps us out. And I also wrote a blog post around data protection and application recovery at KubeCon 2023. So both links are in the show notes below, and just make sure that you have an opportunity to go out and check those assets out as well. So join us for the next episode of Veritas Live on June the 13th, which is only about 2 weeks away. So until then, stay secure, everyone, and back up often.